The best thing about copyright is that it does not require a registration system for its protection. So the moment I draw something in a notebook sitting in this hall, immediately it receives copyright protection. Unlike patents, which have to be registered, unlike trademarks, which have to either be registered or used in order to receive protection, copyright gives you instant protection upon creation. And where? In all Bern and UCC countries, which is over 150 countries.
First, we thank to Meeti and to putting together such an excellent panel. I think, Rakesh, you bring up a real important point. When we look at organizations, when you want to protect your money, you're a chief financial officer. When you want to protect your from cyber attacks, you are chief cyber, CISO in your organization. The question becomes is, how does an organization look at AI? If you look at AI as a technology, then your CIO or CTO can do the job. But in my conversations with maybe over 100 chief AI officers over the past year and a half of Fortune 500 companies, the one thing that is very, very clear to me is they all look at it as a transformation that is happening within an organization. So you might as well call them chief transformation officers. If that is the case, then you need a leader. But just putting a title in to somebody and saying, okay, I'm going to have a chief AI officer or some other title. Like in the US where I'm based, the US government has mandated every government agency has to have a chief AI officer. In the UAE, again, every agency has to have a chief AI officer. But if you don't give the chief AI officer budgetary controls, procurement controls, cross-departmental access, then you might as well call them a chief presentation officer. But my point here is that there is a massive transformation that is going on across the organization. And for that, you need a point person. And the other important thing for this person is where is the reporting structure? If it is 3 layers down with a CFO or a CIO or a CTO, that cannot happen. You cannot do transformation. And it's not just, hey, I want to report to the CEO or stuff like that. Organizations today at a board level are involved. You talk to any Fortune 500 company around the world, and they'll tell you if it is not the number one issue, it's at least in the top 3 issues for a board. Enablement of their organization is important. If that is important, who should they talk to? The CIO, the CTO, or who? So I personally think you need to have a dedicated person. But this person, the skill set is very, very different. It's not someone that you pick from your data science or a machine learning person. This person needs to have governance expertise. This person needs to have compliance expertise. This person needs to have change management expertise. This person needs to have interaction with human resources. So across the board, it's a new position. And I can tell you, in the next 2 years, every Fortune 500 company is going to have a chief AI officer. And if any of you are pursuing that career, it is one of the hardest jobs that exists. And I don't think AI can do the job of a chief AI officer. So I would say there's hopefully a good opportunity for this.
But thank you so much. I think it's really, really important. And that gives a good segue into the real conversation that we are having is sectors. And one of the sectors which is really, really getting disrupted is legal, law and legal in a way, because it's coded and a lot of startups we have seen very usually from Harley and others as they started coming up. And we have our Kavi Praveen here. Praveenji, how do you see all of this playing for your sector that you are working with?
So I think the key word in your topic was collaboration. I belong to the world of intellectual property. And in this world, we have known the laws of most countries to be affected in a big way by roughly about 26 international treaties. which includes, for example, in patents, the Paris Convention or the Patent Cooperation Treaty, and in trademarks, the Madrid Protocol and the Madrid Convention, in designs, the Hague Convention. Like this, there are 25, 26 odd treaties. And those treaties, and you may have heard of at one point of time in the 1990s, of the Dunkel draft, which led to the TRIPS agreement. And what they do is to harmonize the laws of intellectual property of most member states. And that's a very important thing they do. And there's a lot of international cooperation there. There's a lot of exchange of information because if, let's say, there's an inventor in Germany and he comes out with a new form of a thermometer and he applies for a patent under the PCT, then he gets what are known as priority rights for a period of either 12 months or 31 months, depending on which of the conventions he uses, to apply in almost 150 countries without losing his novelty in case he markets the product in the meanwhile. That's a big, big, big advantage. And so the International Convention has given anybody, whether in India or in any of the other PCT countries, a tremendous right. In the field of artificial intelligence, although we've seen computers and software, and we've seen the internet, and we've seen smartphones, at the end of the day, as Nick Bostrom said, AI is there in each one of these. It's just that we fail to recognize it because it's now become quite common. Those telephones, those smartphones have become so common that we don't recognize that AI was at the basis of the technologies that led to smartphones. So the problems of smartphones and the problems of software and the problems of the internet, which we've had for the last many years, at least since 2000, those problems are quite common with the problems of AI. And so at the stage of enforcement also, there's a lot of cooperation which is going on. For example, if a suit is filed in Chicago and evidence has to be collected from somebody who supplied goods from India under the Hague Convention, the judge there can make a letter of request, and the judge here will allow evidence to be collected from a witness here and sent to that court there. Similarly, there's a lot of collaboration that takes place in the field of arbitration. So, whether it is protecting a right or whether it is enforcing a right, apart from that, when we argue cases in court, we cite English decisions. There was a time when we used to cite English decisions only. But today we cite decisions from Germany, from any of the other countries, so long as they are available in the English language. And our courts never look at them. And we used to at one time complain that the English courts never look at Indian decisions. But that started to reverse because some of the landmark cases that we brought in India are being cited in many, many countries, including in African countries and Middle East and the Far East and some of the Asian countries. And so there's a lot of cooperation which is taking place, and it's all protecting. In AI also, there's this fundamental cooperation.
Thank you. Would you just like to extend this argument to how are we dealing with copyright? I think we keep hearing issues with respect to data. Who owns it? Who's using it? What are the models getting trained on? What are the implications for our startups, etc., that are part of this conversation today?
The best thing about copyright is that it does not require a registration system for its protection. So the moment I draw something in a notebook sitting in this hall, immediately it receives copyright protection. Unlike patents, which have to be registered, unlike trademarks, which have to either be registered or used in order to receive protection. Copyright gives you instant protection upon creation. And where? In all Bern and UCC countries, which is over 150 countries. Which means that if I draw a cartoon here, I receive protection automatically in 150 countries. Of course, it's a different matter of proving it. If somebody copies tomorrow, how do I prove that I created it at a particular time? There are ways to do that. But that's a matter of proof. But that's the beauty of copyright. 1. 2, data. There's a distinction between data and database. Databases are organized data. When you put them in rows and columns, for example. A database is protected as a literary work under the Copyright Act. Raw data is not protected. So if the computer kind of spews out zeros and ones in the millions, all that raw data does not have copyright. So how is it protected? It's important because a lot of the communications would take place with that raw data. It is protected either if it is personal, then it is protected under the DPDP Act. If it is not personal, not belongs to a natural person, belongs to, let's say, a corporate entity, a juristic person, then it can be protected either as a trade secret or under the breach of confidentiality regime. For example, the Poolan Devi case. You would recollect the Poolan Devi had sued Shekhar and the director and Channel 4 television for Bandit Kui. What was she objecting to? She was objecting to, in the Bandit Kui film, one rape scene. And the question arose, is there a right of privacy for a celebrity? The court said, yes, there is, and granted a protection. So, privacy started then. Now, privacy is, for an individual, has been legislated in a DPDP Act. Digital privacy. So, it's protected. One way or the other, data is protected by privacy laws or by copyright laws.
Thank you so much. I think I'll pivot this again to His Excellency Andrew Barrison, sir. So with this whole AI, the whole thing seems getting complicated. As our colleague just said, talked about copyright, data acts, DPDP acts, and personal information. And today, on the other end, we are doing a lot of work on identities and using identity to give a lot of services. So how is Suriname looking at all of this, and how are you collaborating? How do you intend to collaborate with the private sector to make all of this happen in your country?
Good question. I came from the private sector myself and stepped into politics because we need a change in Suriname. As I think is the case everywhere in the world, we would like to see politics being managed differently. So what I'm doing as a minister is really collaborate, invite different associations of businesses in Suriname to, on a regular basis, meet with me, and we talk about the challenges that we face. It's a collaboration, as I just said, between entrepreneurs, the business, the government, and the educational system, and it's setting up plans how to execute and tackle different challenges that we have. For example, intellectual properties. I have one of my directors here, and then asked him a couple of weeks back to really manage this thing. We have a big challenge in getting all dossiers, still hard copies, print outs, that we have to digitalize and to really shape the keurmerken, the trademarks and the logos and all the names. So we are asking for the private sector to collaborate and setting up, we are getting a lot of help and support from the multilateral banks, the IDB, the World Bank, different projects that they fund. Of course, we are looking at sustainability of projects. So one thing that has my focus now, and I think it's all over a challenge, is not just to accept a grant or accept some funds in order to finalize a project, but to make sure that the earning capacity is guaranteed. We are sometimes anxious because we get some money to do a project and then we are happy. With AI now, some countries in the region are thinking about setting up new data centers. And from a political standpoint, it looks nice to, turnkey, you open it up, all media there, you shake hands and you're the popular guy. That's not of interest to me. What I'm looking at is really making sure that our people benefit in the long term. So making sure that it's not a popularity game, but with the private sector, really, that word already fell, making sure that we have a change of mind, attitude in how we go about a sustainable implementation of artificial intelligence, digital technology, and making people part of the process. It's not an Andrew thing. It's not a political thing, but it's making sure that all of society, the whole nation, gets on board with one vision. And again, it's being open-minded. It's not working in silos. And I think with that vision and that attitude that I'm presenting, I'm bringing people together and trying to make a difference, not just in Suriname, but in the region.
Now I know why you are so serious. Because you have to work on this IP thing, I believe. Okay. So, Shweta, question for you. I think the Intel plays a role across so many countries. What do you think are the countries collaborating around this area of the AI? And if they have to collaborate, what would be your few recommendations?
Sure. So, gradually, I think over a couple of months, or maybe I should say a year or two, we see the focus move more from competition to cooperation. So there's a lot of cooperation which is happening at the country level to decide how do we not just share best practices. Since you spoke about, pilots, and I think His Excellency also spoke about there's a lot of vision of what happens beyond pilots. I think it's really important to not just look at any conversation today on AI just as a conversation or as a pilot or as a proof of concept. It becomes so important to work together collaboratively to not just work at the data level or collection of data level to ensure that, there is no data bias. We look at a lateral organization of trying to figure out what's the best way to implement AI, but more importantly, even in the policy space. So a recent conversation which we've had with a couple of countries, and I'm talking about Asia Pacific in general. So it was actually between the mature countries and the developing markets, where they were sharing on what are the challenges which the mature countries are facing today so that all the new age plans which the developing markets are building, they don't go, they kind of don't go through the whole cycle again. They learn from what has gone well and what has not gone so well, and then factor that into their actionable plans when they talk about implementing AI for good governance. So that's something which has worked very well. Without naming any specific country, I would say I've certainly seen some excellent best practices happening. Of course, I could talk about Japan, I could talk about South Korea, Singapore, which is like a flagship in itself. But the most innovative best practices is what I see in maybe a Vietnam or a Thailand or Indonesia and India, of course. I must say that because I am in this country. But I think one of the largest cooperation which I've seen is with the government extending not just help to have conversations, but support to implement AI at the grassroots level, which they've done across multiple markets today.
Can I just you? So I agree with what Shweta said. But in the conversations that we have, there is a bifurcation that you now see. You have the US, you have China, and you have the EU. EU is the only one which has the EU AI Act. US doesn't have. any regulation. We are basically states who are going, and we are not going to have a federal regulation. The challenge, Ravi, that we now see is AI has become a matter of national security. So there's a key race that who's going to be number one, so to speak. And, who wins the race is going to have a huge technological, incentive. So the incentive to kind of come together, let's say in the nuclear energy, we have the IAEA. There's no way we can have an organization today for something that would coordinate, because the implications for AI, I mean, if some of you be reading what's happening with OpenClaw and Notebook and others, are as serious. But there is no conversation that we should, maybe those key players should sit together and have this discussion. We're all discussing as to how many chips we can make and how fast we can go. So I think the serious discussion needs to be had on something of this nature.
I totally agree. And I think that brings us to the point of trust. And how do you see, sir, trust evolving in this space, and what role it will play for various partners in the ecosystem to work together? Questions? Yes. No.
How do I see trust evolving?
Yeah.
Well, the way I look at it, trust comes when you're familiar with a certain system. The moment you enter a lane which is dark, there's loss of trust. The moment there's good lighting, you get trust. Now take that analogy a little further to the legal system. What has happened is that in the last 5 years, ever since the Commercial Courts Act came in throughout the country, just for those who don't know, there's one Supreme Court at the top, and then there are 25 high courts in most of the states, except that some states share a high court. And then there are roughly about 700 district courts under them. And unlike America, we have a single system. It's called a unitary system, which means you can file a case in the district court, appeal goes to the high court, appeal goes to the Supreme Court. Or you can, in 5 high courts, you can file a case straight to the high court. They have what is known as an original site. Now the courts have built trust by providing transparency. For example, it used to take upwards of 5 years, maybe 10 years, upwards of 10 years for a lawsuit to be decided. Now the Commercial Courts Act divides the lifespan of litigation into 8 distinct parts, with each one having a mandatory maximum, which means if you're supposed to file a written statement within 120 days, 121st day your right is lost, even if there's a death in the family. It's so strict. That's a very transparent timeline for life. So litigation finishes in 2 to 3 years, as opposed to upward of 5 years, 10 years. That's one. 2, if there's concept like discovery, where you can ask for seeing the other person's documents, inspection, interrogatories. You have Anton Pillar orders by which you can go to the person's premises and see his records. A surprise raid, if you might call it. All these are mechanisms that have created a lot of trust. And at the end of the day, your lawyer can always question somebody who gives a vague answer in cross-examination. And all these judges are supposed to give reasons for their rewards. If they don't give a reason for a judgment or an order, it can be set aside in appeal. Everything builds trust. Sure, sir.
Thank you so much. I do understand that trust for AI is quite a foundational pillar. And Sir just mentioned that it is a race. Now, I don't know whether it's a commercial race or a race of trust which will win, but eventually we will get there. All of us will witness it. As we're getting to the last 5-10 minutes, I just wanted all of the panelists to kind of crystal gaze into next few years and think of a scenario if it becomes monopolistic. If there are only a few companies who are able to give you the infrastructure and the core applications around which we work, then how do you see this collaboration coming along? What should we do? And sir, we'll start with you, sir. Your Excellency, how does Suriname envision a scenario where, if it becomes monopolistic, how would the country deal with it?
Yes. To maybe add on my I don't want to say colleague, the expert, the legal expert here next to me. I learned that trust comes, and I need to translate this, comes by foot and it leaves by horse. That's a saying we have in Suriname. So I think that need to be no fear. You also hear that there is fear about, losing certain jobs, especially maybe in the IT, etc., etc. I think that we need to look with a positive mind at the development, the opportunities that are being presented with artificial intelligence. Not be scared, but look for opportunities. I think that new jobs will be created. And I think that when you know who you are, where your strengths lies, there should be no fear into collaborating with like-minded companies, governments, and looking really across borders. That's a confidence I have. That's a confidence that leadership should have. Once you can build trust in leadership, I think the trust in application of artificial intelligence will be there. That's something that we will build. That's something that we are building in Suriname, but also with neighboring countries and partners over the world. So it's a challenge. It's a mind shift. It's knowing, finding, the same people, like-minded people, students, setting up the programs in school, in our educational system, not just the technological part, but looking at how we develop our people, not just the youngsters, but develop people not to be scared, and backing off artificial intelligence, but to urge them to use it, because we will not lose to artificial intelligence. We will lose, if you lose your job, it's going to be losing someone who is using artificial intelligence. So we need to educate and train our people. And I think in the long run, we will reap the benefits of that.
Thank you so much. A very optimistic view, and I'm sure we have to take that view and work towards it. Shweta, your last comments on how do you see, which sectors do you see getting impacted the most over next year or two?
Actually, all of them. Let's be very clear about it. If I have to really gaze into the crystal ball, AI will get integrated across all sectors, some a little quickly and some not so fast. I think what is more important is, and what really concerns us at this point in time, I'm assuming everybody here has spoken about digital divide many years and, have really kind of figured out how to manage a digital divide. Today, what concerns us is the AI divide, which is something which we need to be very careful on. We don't want AI to be in a situation where that access to the right technologies available only in the hands of few, that's for sure. And when you talk about democratization of AI, and specifically from a skilling point of view, because His Excellency spoke on that, I would say the idea is that we need to ensure that the future generation or future of work is in a way aligned with what the education systems are really preparing the generation for. Now, all of us are AI users. The whole concept is, how do we ensure that we become AI knowledge creators? And that is what will keep us in our jobs, and that is what will ensure that the future generation has a job when they get out of their education institutions.
Thank you. Yes, please.
Sir, I have a question to Praveen sir or comment paper. How to deal with international cybercrime, especially crypto and TAPTER and MITI?
One of the greatest problems that we had in cybercrime is that you can bring an action, and we've done many of those cases for Microsoft and Amazon and others. At the end of the day, you can stop the rock, but very difficult to get money or to cause an arrest, for the reason that the identity which is not, identities are not disclosed while registering domain names. Why? Because the international system, ICANN, does not have a KYC check at the time of registering domain names. India, interestingly, has departed, and Nixie for .in now insists on a KYC check. So we've gone our own way in a very important area, and we urge at one point of time or the other for ICANN also to build in a system by which identities can be secured at the time of registering domain names, so that you can know who is the wrongdoer, not just stop the wrong.
I think I just add, this is a question of national security, to be honest. At least I consider it that way. Your threat vectors have changed. Your response times have to be much faster. AI acts on both sides. It can act as on the side of cyber crimes and also helping us mitigate all of that. So obviously, we'll have to work towards it in a collaborative manner with the academia, with institutions like Intel and others, so that we have the right people mind behind it. And we are ahead on the game. Every country would want that. Every institution would want that, to be ahead on that. And AI fundamentally does correlation. And if you're fast at it, if you have the right compute, right algorithms to work with it, I think it's a very relevant question, and it is something which you all need to give it.
Can I
Yes.
quickly add? Just let me answer since you, even before the crime really happens, I think that is why it's so important for every citizen to be completely aware on how to navigate themselves in a world which is going to be fueled by AI. That is a reality. We are living in a world where we would see AI all around us, but how do we navigate ourselves and our work lives is something which becomes extremely important.
Why is so much of data important? तो डेटा क्यों इम्पोर्टेंट है? सो जैसे अभी एक एग्जांपल है, लास्ट वीक एंथ्रोपिक ने एक रिपोर्ट रिलीज करी कि the AI was trying to deceive and it was trying to resist shutdown and doing all sorts of things. So वो ऐसा है कि it's not the intrinsic optimization function of the LLM to resist shutdowns. It is just a reflection of the data it has been trained on. Whereas seeing, sci-fi stories or articles or Asimov, everything which says, okay, if that happens, you have to resist shutdown. The AI is only trained on one thing and just one thing: predict the next of it. So unlike humans, or through evolution, we have been trained to optimize on don't die, reproduce. So for us, it's a natural thing to resist, somebody trying to shut us down. Whereas for all these LLMs, all behavior comes from the data that it has been trained on. So I think that's why data is, because I keep saying that the LLM is not a mind, but it's a mirror. It's a reflection on the data that it has been trained on. So I just add to the questions of perhaps CI. He says everything is 0-1. So why don't we work with synthetic data? So perhaps. So synthetic data, the issue is, you have to go back to information theory. If you're using synthetic data, where is that data being generated from? If you're generating it from, a model, then all it will generate is what's already encoded in the model. Nothing new will come. To get new information, you need real data. So synthetic data has its limits.
Yeah, I just wanted to add what you said. Nick Bostrom, the Swedish philosopher, very well known for his books, came up with the paperclip maximizer. What he said was that if you tell it's a mind experiment. He said if you ask an AI system to produce paper clips, it will keep producing them to the point that everything on earth will become a paper clip. Even humans will be converted into paper clips. But it has no motive. It has no evil motive. It's only doing what he was asked to do. And that demonstrates the fact that it's what you train.
And in fact, one of the things related to that is, if you look at the logo of OpenAI, it's a series of paper clips. It goes back to that Nick Bostrom.
So one of the points that has come up is The data that we see, internet data, 70% of it is English and Western culture made. So what you're going to see is historically that. So the question will be, the kids who are growing up in India or Africa or other places in Suriname, they're getting all of this data that is coming to you. I go back to what you were talking about. Mark Carney said in Davos, maybe the mid powers need to come together, or the global south need to come together in forming some kind of a foundation models that has local languages and other stuff, because otherwise the 5-year-old and 7-year-old and the 8-year-olds are coming up on this kind of a technology, which is less like 70% is Western culture and Western language oriented.
Thank you. Very, very pertinent.
Hi. So basically, as you all know, that a single AI model basically produces more than 24 tons of carbon dioxide. So just with the respect to the topic that we have, collaborating across sectors for the AI impact, I just want to know your point of view. With the AI getting implemented in all the sectors, how do we also make sure that we don't basically produce more carbon dioxide in the just to save the environment?
So one of the things is that there are so many open source models, open weight models, that trying to regulate usage and development is going to be extremely. Anyone can download the weights and run it on your laptop.
Yeah.
So trying to regulate that way is not going to be very easy, or try to regulate the foundation on it. You may be able to regulate the applications that, but regulating the models, regulating a model is going to be very, very difficult. I think that horse has sort of left the barn. You cannot regulate models, first of all, because there are so many open source models. Compute is becoming so powerful that, I was talking about laptop. Now you can run the model on your phone. So regulating that is going to be very, very difficult. So I'm not sure about where you were leading to with the third question, but regulating that is going to be difficult. That's also related to the other security questions that were asked. And about the Gemini question, what was the sorry, yeah. So that's like an application running on top of it, on a model. Right? Gemini has a base model, but they are also providing a chat interface. So most of these companies now offer enterprise versions of their chat or APIs or chatbots, where they promise they won't use your data to train their models. They promise all sorts of security, which most cloud providers do already for other kind of data, but they're also doing it now for your chat sessions. So you were using probably the free version, the pro version, and it just removed the chat. So that's a very interesting behavior.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was also.
That reminds me of Blake Lemoine.
Yeah.
What Blake Lemoine, an engineer working with Google, he actually was hired because he said that his conversations with the LLM that Google owned he had got angry. Why? Because he had said, "You're worthless, you're useless," and then he says what the LLM was trained not to talk of, namely religion. He answered questions of religion saying the best religion is the religion of such and such, the white man. And he was trained not to talk about that. So Blake Lemoine came up with a paper saying that it has acquired consciousness. And then Google says Google said that's rubbish, so they fired him. But YouTube is full of interviews by him, and almost every book on AI talks about Blake Lemoine.
It's Natasha Tiku wrote that article from Washington Post, but no longer Washington Post. They just made up everyone. I've spoken to Natasha, and that is completely bogus. It's matrix multiplication. There's no consciousness. There's no sentience. It's complete nonsense, and therefore, it was hyped up so much, and it created so much scare. We are not there. It's probability, it's matrix multiplication. That's all it is. It's a reflection of what it's been trained on.
Correct.
So it has read some stuff on Reddit or on Wikipedia or some books. and it's just trying to replicate those probability. There is no consciousness, there is no anger, there is no sadness. It just it reacts to your prompt, and as it starts reacting to your prompts, it goes in a direction. But again, those probabilities are acting out. There is no consciousness. Anyone who says that, no, please don't believe that there is any consciousness or it's getting angry or it's getting sad.
I agree, and I think he'll have Shweta have the last word now.
Okay, I'm going to try and attempt at least 3 questions in a single call. There is a program called AI for Current Workforce.
This is our GPT, yeah?
Please go through that. It's completely free of cost, but I would really advise you need to kind of go through that program. Somebody raised a question about the impact on environment, right? Look at the concept called frugal AI, because that is what is really important. You don't need to burn a forest every time you need to do an AI project. So look at frugal AI. And third, you had a conversation on why can't startups kind of align and collaborate together? Community of practice is a great way to do it. We've been doing it in a lot of fields. I think that's something which you can explore. Set up a community of practice where people who are like-minded and have that expertise can come together and contribute to a lot of startups.
We conclude this in hopes that we can have the conversation. Azaba, thank you so much. Love it, group.
Thanks for tuning in to the Regulating AI podcast with Sanjay Puri. If you enjoyed today's conversation, don't forget to leave a comment. We'd love to hear what you thought. Share it with someone curious about the future of AI, and join us next time for more stories and insights from the leaders shaping what's ahead. Right here on the Regulating AI podcast.